Hey everybody, what's going on? Justin Glover here with Brenda Gagne for another episode of the Results 513 show. This is the Ask 513 version of the show, and today we are answering another one of your questions. But before we do, Brenda, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing awesome. I like this question today.
It's a great question.
It's a big question, but it's really cool.
So let's get into that. Carson submitted this question, and he said, I have an email list and a small core group of buyers of my own information products. I've been wanting to host a live in-person meetup with them because I believe that it will deepen the long-term connection and relationship that I have with my audience. But I'm not sure the best way to start or how to get people there. In another episode, I heard you mention that you have hosted your own live events before in the past. So what advice would you give someone as myself? Before we dive into it, what we're going to do, if it's okay with you, I haven't told you this yet.
Okay.
But, we're going to actually break this one up into 2 episodes. So this one, we're going to talk about how to host the first live event. And then in the next episode, we'll actually talk about how to get people there. So we'll talk about how to promote, how to get people there. We'll talk about a campaign, some campaigns that have worked for us, and we'll break it up. You'll get a better answer than if we break it up into 2 episodes. So with that being said, the initial response, how do you host a live event? What's your initial response to this question, Brenda?
Well, I like where it's coming from, because that means not so much the question, but what he said, because his reasoning of it'll help me build a deeper relationship with my buyers and long-term customers. And that's exactly true. That really does happen when you have a live event. There's nothing like a real in-person connection. Being like we are, video through online, being on Skype calls, being on webinars, it's just not the same. When you actually get somebody into a real situation, then I can't touch you. That's right. Where's my?
Sorry, if you're listening to the audio version of this only, I was just like poking the screen and demonstrating that you like there's different, like that's it's close but not quite the same.
Definitely, and and if you've never been to a live event, you're listening and you're just saying like, okay, people say that. I remember being there too. I remember thinking like, what's the difference? Like I can just watch live stream or I can just be on the webinar. It's not that big of a deal until, you finally go and you start realizing it. And I think I remember someone even telling me, like years after I'd been going to events, they were like, I never got it. This was my first event and I never got what everybody kept saying. She's like, there's nothing like this. And I was like, I know. And the problem is you can't ever get people to really get it until they actually go. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have gone before. So the fact that you want to be able to create your own live event is really awesome. And kind of the first place for me that it would be like, what type of an event? Because there's a lot of different kinds of events that you can have. And I had the intention years before we ever even hosted our first event that I wanted to do one. And it seemed like this really big thing and I knew I wanted to do it, but I was going to maybe like start locally and start small as to doing like this big thing where people have to fly in. But just that's the first thing, like what type of event, what's the goal of the event, and that's kind of like the first thing to be figured out, really.
That's definitely step one. What is the objective? What type of event do you want? Is this a more so of a meet and greet, more so of a small group meetup / mastermind feel, or is it a bigger like shebang? Is it something that's going to come with a stage and people flying in and coming together to watch presentations that you've put together for 2 or 3 days or whatever? Or is it going to be a mix of some of that and, some networking and going and doing activities to bond? If that's the first step, like figure out what the objective is, what type of event you want to have. Reading this question, it says that, you understand that it will deepen the long-term connection that you have with your audience. And you're right. Any type of event that you do will absolutely do that. However, what's interesting for me, and this is coming from someone who's spent a little bit too much money hosting the wrong types of events. I can tell you that it doesn't matter what kind of event that you actually host, you're going to have that connection. But when you can incorporate something that's outside of the norm, where people just shuffle into a room, sit in a chair, and stare up somebody speaking to them from the stage, and maybe a little bit of conversation in the background in between or afterwards or whatever in the hallway. If you can incorporate something else other than that typical type of scenario, then you're going to create an even deeper connection that will last even longer, because you're going to create stories with people. So if your goal is to create stories, I would highly, highly, highly recommend adding some kind of component of networking, but an experience, more of an experience with people, something that people can do, whether it's, we've taken people hot air balloon riding, deep sea fishing. You can go play golf together. You can go climb a mountain together. Whatever the activity is, or maybe it's just, sightseeing, or, you go take a little certain tour or a hike or anything. Lots and lots of options. But by creating that type of experience and building that into your event, that is one component that will get you those long-term, really deep connections that I know that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
You asked this question, so.
And, even as when you say something like the hot air balloon ride or the deep sea fishing, there's definitely expenses to those kind of things. And so it really goes into play, what's your price point? How much of your margin's going to be? But yet going to climb the mountain, that's free, something like that. But we even had one which really stood out at the end of the weekend was the fireside chat. It was something that was just built into your nighttime, where instead of okay, we're done at 5, and then everybody's just kind of there, you're in the hotel, you're all there still, instead of just having people randomly being hey, do you want to go? Oh, hey, we're going to go do this. Organize something hey, okay, we're going to be here for from 7 to 9:30 right by this specific area, and that's free to you. It doesn't have to cost you anything, but then that's where stories can be created, and you kind of have something going on. I mean, there was even that one that we had, there was a piano, and just lo and behold, someone knew how to play the piano, and it became this really cool, enjoyable thing that was somewhat planned because we were going to do that, but you didn't know what was going to happen. So being able to add that in absolutely is real important. I would say one of the things to think of also is your venue. Where do you want to have this? Because obviously expenses they can be big. We've wasted a lot of money. I don't want to say wasted, but spent a lot of money where sometimes it's not necessarily needs to be spent. Your attendees are going to get the experience from what you create. It doesn't really matter how fancy everything actually really is, as long as they're having a good experience. So being able to have a smaller room with not a lot of AV stuff or, big screens can sometimes come away with a better experience as to a real big room with presentations because it's a little bit smaller. So, I guess that really just kind of go into, again, your objective. What do you want to put out there?
I mean, this is your first event. And so anybody hosting their first event, I would highly recommend keeping it casual, keeping it as affordable as possible, as low ticket as possible. Maybe not for the ticket. I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to be the stipulation, but in terms of production, in terms of you putting it together. Because in that the first event that I hosted, I did not go that route. I wanted to create this amazing experience for people. And so we had everything from people driving them in rented vehicles with chauffeurs from the airport and back, and the best binders and the best name badges and all of this stuff that were just extra expenses that people, they would see it and be oh, that's a nice touch, that's cool, whatever, but that's kind of it. The stories are made, the long term, they don't remember those things now that we had the best name badges of every event they've been, they don't remember that. We hosted another event where people literally paid several $1,000s to come, and we had this little roll of thing and a black marker and said, write your name on it, stick it on your shirt. They didn't care. It wasn't that. That's not the reason that they were there. So you can also get really, really in a lot of trouble with the hotel rooms if you don't do that properly. So I do want to talk about that in terms of finding rooms and getting room blocks, because this is something that I've learned the hard way.
A lot of people have.
One, in the first event that I did, when we had event planners, which they come with a fee, and then the prices sort of get elevated from there because there's a commission structure involved. And it's just, I don't think that's the ideal way to host your first event. I think you need to get one under your belt first, Do something low-key, something that's going to be easy for you, something that you can pull off where you can actually be present. If you want to create these experiences for people and these memories for people and deepen these relationships, you've got to be present with them. That's the only way that you're going to do it. And Brenda, you were at the first event that I held, and I was present with people, but every single moment that I was
You
not
were
actually
freaking out.
talking one-on-one with somebody, I was freaking out on the inside. And this happened weeks leading up to it, and even until it was over, I felt like I just couldn't breathe out. I couldn't relax. I couldn't enjoy myself. I couldn't have fun because there was so much that had to be coordinated and work out perfectly. You compare that to one of the more recent events that we've done. We've got some people in a room that we're just talking. Like there's not a lot. There's structure, but there's not a lot of plan, right? There's not a lot of working components. It allows me to be a lot more present with people through the whole thing, a lot less stressful to actually pull it off, and a lot more affordable. So that would be definitely the direction that I would recommend if this is your first event. Take that route first. Get one of those, a couple of those underneath your belt before you start going the direction of trying to model some of the bigger events that you may have seen or been to, where there's a stage and planners and dinners and all of that stuff involved. Most of the time, all of that stuff can be handled just by you making a phone call to the hotel and saying, look, I've got a group of people that's going to be about this size people, and we want to do something. What are my options? And just talking through them with it. Like, what are my options with the room block? I want to keep this as affordable as possible, but classy as possible. They will give you they will be your best event planners initially, right? Like they'll be able to help you, and they'll still do a really nice job. And so that would be something that I would definitely mention.
I would say if you're contemplating what type of event, if these are your current buyers, so you're not really going out, and that's what you said, doing it for my current buyers to deepen the relationship, maybe go something a little bit more high ticket since these are your current buyers. You're not really going outside to be, people know who you are. These are your buyers. So a really good scenario for that is just a smaller type of group. I mean, it could be less than 10, it may no more than 20, because if you get over that, then you're trying to create more of an intimate, trying to find your core group of people that are going to follow and go through. And so one of the things that we've done different ways was, there was a round table. That was like the whole concept, where literally it didn't cost us anything because we only rented out the boardroom, like a small boardroom, and we had less than 10 people that we weren't going to have anymore. We didn't do any type of room blocks because it didn't really matter per se where we were, because everybody was coming literally for a mastermind to walk through everyone's problems. And by the end of the weekend, you were going to have, that was the gist of it. We were really just masterminding, walking through. Everybody was going to have their own few hours to talk. Everybody went together. And the day before, I'm just saying, some days before, we've had a little a VIP where people maybe paid more, where we met with them one-on-one, so that you can get a little bit of extra income coming from that, but your expenses are low. Versus now that one right there, that was a really high ticket. That was with the ones where it's less than 10.
I think $5,000.
Right, it's $5,000 for because all we were doing was focused on their business. It was one-on-one, 3 days or 2.5 days of concentrated work. I mean, we took breaks together. We went to dinner together. We came back. Sometimes we ate through lunch. We were just really there for a purpose, more of a workshop thing. And that was a great experience. You really get to know your people. Versus maybe one where it's less than 30, but you do have a little front of the room whiteboard. You do have kind of your chairs set back where it doesn't cost quite as much to be able to go and attend. And you've got some trainings and then maybe some breakout sessions. And we've done that in the past where we've had specific breakouts where, okay, well, you need to work on tech. So that's going to be over in this corner. You need to work on your copy. That's going to be over in this corner. And or you guys are just brainstorming back here. You work together on this, and then we'll come back together. So that type of an experience, it's worth more, as you leave, action steps. That's really what you want to create.
Enroll people that are there to contribute to the content. There's less planning, less sort of something that you actually have to do. So if you make them more so workshop style, where like this is more of a conversation in compared to, this is us standing up on stage, like walking through PowerPoint presentations, you can have those. And that's whatever the content there, like, because we're going to talk about this in the next episode, but people won't come if like there's not a reason for them to come. So you got to figure out the benefit, and that isn't typically in terms of, is this going to be something where I'm just focused on your business? That's a big benefit. Or is it going to be something where you're going to learn, I'm going to teach you this, and this while you're there, plus we're going to do these other things. So, it really is up to you. Prep your stuff ahead of time. The promotion of it, the preparation of it in terms of content, that's really the most difficult part. All of the other stuff is pretty easy. It's not always the funnest stuff, to be talking about, well, how many people are going to show up, how are they getting there, where are they staying, helping out with reservations and travel stuff, because that's one of the keys to the event is you need to actually, as the event host, you're going to need to give them that information, right? Like, even, whenever one of the first ones that I did, I was like, do people really need that? Like, they're adults, they can get there. I just give them the address, right? And like, I got there.
No.
That's, yes, that's true, but it's not going to set the, you'll kind of have, you won't live up to other events, because if they've been to any other event, the directions and that part of the stuff is always communicated well. So
yeah,
if you can just keep those things in mind, I think that you're going to be just fine. Definitely would recommend keeping the first one small, and just set a date that you're going to do it. And because once the date is, call the hotel, get it locked in, and ask them on specifically about the room block. Ask them, see what you can do. Just talk to them, have a conversation with the people that are in charge with that stuff, and say, look, I'm probably going to have around 10 people or 20 people. I would like to give them a discounted room if that's possible, but if I don't sell, if all 20 people don't show up, I don't want to be on the hook for paying those rooms. That's one place that will get you in trouble. Make sure that that's not part of the deal. And most, sometimes not always they'll be able to give you a discount. They'll just say, look, we can sort of hold these, just tell your people to call in and ask for this, and we'll make sure that they're guaranteed a room for these dates, but it won't be discounted. But sometimes it actually is discounted. If you tell the people, look, if this goes well, there's a very likely possibility that we'll come back. I'll do more events here at this hotel, and they will, and many times give you a discount on the rooms. And so your people, that's a very big value add whenever you're actually promoting. So that's pretty much it in terms of planning and getting the first one underway. Like I said, we're going to talk more about how to actually promote in the next episode. But any final thoughts on this one before we close it down?
Yeah, figure out what your objective is, and kind of just work from there. Sometimes just talking to your people, throwing out an email or a video and getting some response back, if you're not really quite sure, would be a great way to see what is your need right now. Do they want to maybe give them some choices, put a survey out? Do they want to learn this? Do they want to do this? Because they're different experiences, and where do you feel more comfortable? Figuring that out first is definitely where you need to go, and then figuring out how it's going to happen would be the second step. So.
Yeah. All right, so that wraps up this episode. Thanks so much for asking the question, Carson. We appreciate it. If you have any more questions, submit them to results513.com/ask, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Bye-bye.